never fucked anybody over in my life. Didn't have it coming to me. You got that? All I have in this world is my balls and my word. And I don't break them for no one. You understand?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Tu me déçois énormément.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Je suis colère, les enfants, je suis colère.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Admit One, your movie ticket. I am your host, Jim. First, right off the bat, I'd like to apologize for last week's episode. While I thought it was a good episode, I realized during editing that there was some audio issues that are beyond my technical capabilities to fix. So hopefully those are non-existent this time. So again, I apologize. Today we're going to be talking about, I guess we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about a director who happens to be my favorite director. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But in case you haven't guessed by the title, we're going to be talking about David Fincher today. I don't know exactly why or how he became my favorite director, but I guess it was early 2000s. I remember watching, we used to go, we had this cabin up in Crestline, California. We'd go up there like almost every summer, and we'd get a VCR and just rent a bunch of movies. And that's all we would do. We'd go up there, chill at the cabin, and watch movies. One of those times happened to be Fight Club. And I remember at the end, and this was before I knew, movie stuff where I really got into it. But, when they, at the very end, when they're watching the buildings fall, and then there's that final slide, if you will, of a nice big cock. And I remember catching it and no one else did. And I was like, did you guys see that? And they're like, what? So I rewound it and I paused it right on that frame. And then I was like, okay, I'm going outside. So that was really my first introduction, I guess, was Fight Club. And then a couple years later, when DVDs were the new hot shit, I'd spent like $200 on a DVD player, which is insane. I haven't spent that on a Blu-ray player. That's crazy. Same DVD player I talked about in the Resident Evil one. But for Christmas, my dad's like, what do you want? And I was like, I want Fight Club. No, let me take that back. Let me take it back. It was before I had a DVD player. We're in Costco, and Costco used to have this insane selection of VHSs. This was before, again, DVDs were cool. And they had, you could just go there, and it would be like shopping at Fry's Electronics, how they used to be with DVDs. You could walk down aisles and aisles and aisles of VHSs. And I picked up a couple, and I was like, Mom, I want to buy these. Can you please give me some of your money so I can purchase these? And I had like 4, and she's like, you can get 2. So I was like, all right, well, what do I want? One of them was Fight Club, and I was like, I need this. For some reason, I remember liking this movie. I was like, I need this in my life. So that was one of the ones I picked. The other one was Double Team, so there's no accounting for taste, but that was my first real, I like this guy. I want this movie. What else has he done? So let's fast forward back to when I had, this Christmas or whatever. My dad's like, what do you want? And I was like, I want Fight Club and I want 7. And they were the cool special editions. The 7 one looked like, or at least the inside looked like those memo pads that John Doe writes on. And the Fight Club one was it looked like the brown package with the twine wrapped around it. I don't think I have them anymore, which is a shame, but I don't remember really why I asked for them. I was just like, I have this Fight Club. I like this guy. I found out that he did 7, and I was like, I need this. And then from there on, really, it was just like, oh, now he's got this movie. Now hey, I like this guy. I like his style. I like the tone that he sets out with these. Maybe I'll research him a little more. And then it kind of snowballed from there, and now he is what he is to me. So to go through his filmography, I guess, we all know that he started out with Alien 3, which I've always liked. And this was, we've rented it before, and it is what it is to me before I really realized, like, oh shit, like, David Fincher did this. And this was before internet and stuff, where you could log on to Twitter daily and see people's negative comments on anything. I've really always liked it. I've never understood the hatred of it. Is it one of the best Alien movies or one of the best movies of anything? Definitely not. But to me, like, it brings Alien back to its roots. Like, the first one was horror, and the second one was more action-y because it's James Cameron. There's still horror elements of it for sure, but it is more of an action movie. Whereas Alien 3 brings it back to that horror. They're stranded on the prison this time, and there's something hunting them. She knows what it is, but no one else has really experienced this before. So that's where I came at it from. And we're really lucky that this wasn't the last time we saw David Fincher. And I can't find anywhere, we all know that he disowns this movie through and through. But I can't find anywhere where he tried to get an Alan Smithee credit. If you have that information, I'd love to know. But I can't find proof of that anywhere, which is interesting because he hates this movie, but he's like, I did it, but it's not me, My name is still attached to it, but it is what it is. And so, back when I was still really writing, I started doing these series of articles for Constantly Calibrating called Making the Case, where I would find movies that I felt were misjudged or misaligned, looked at wrong, things like that, for no apparent reason, and just kind of make the defense of why you should at least try to enjoy this movie. And the first one I ever did was Alien 3. So let me read to you my article. After Aliens was released in 1986, 20th Century Fox sought to capitalize on its success with a follow-up. Any person with a brain who has any idea or small idea of how Hollywood works, or any business for that matter, you could see that coming from a mile away. What followed, however, was not your typical success story. Cancelled scripts, millions spent on sets, and several directors later, Alien 3 stands as a low point in the Alien mythology. It's not the lowest, but it is pretty low. To some. It's no secret that Alien 3 had a troubled production. You can read all about it on the internet. You can also literally watch it happen. Several of the DVD and Blu-ray releases of the movie contain a documentary detailing the rocky path this movie took to get to us. Its own director even disowns the flick, which is a shame. But we'll get to that a little later. So what went wrong here? Why is it hated so much? Let's try to peel back the layers of this onion in this edition of Making the Case. I'm not an apologist for this movie. It has some very clunky parts and essentially erases all that Aliens did. But if you look at it from a different perspective, it really took the movie back to its roots. Alien was a very personal film that tried to tap into the fear of isolation and claustrophobia. It excels on so many levels with the less is more approach. You don't really see the alien until the very end in one of the most intense scenes in the movie. Alien could stand on its own, and looking at it, you wouldn't think this would spawn sequel material. In reality, it spawned one of the most interesting universes one could think of, but that's for another article. When Aliens came along, we were given a sequel that expanded in all the right ways. James Cameron managed to keep all of the things that made Alien great and intense and injected it with action steroids. It does what I want a sequel to do. Its title is even a nice little wink to the audience. To me, Alien 3 takes a somewhat logical choice in its direction. How do you expand on a story where its antagonists are seemingly all destroyed? You could follow the Queen as it drifts through space. You could say there was another planet. But how do you bring Ripley back, who is described rightfully so as the anchor of the franchise? Well, she's floating through space, so what if the Queen had dropped 1 or 2 eggs in the Sulaco? The movie attempts to scale its grandeur back big time, and I think that's where fans felt the most slighted. As much as Alien is beloved by all, it's superfluous in Alien's eyes. You can watch Aliens without seeing its predecessor and know exactly what's going on, so it then becomes the focal point of the series. The second you try to disrupt that, you lose everything. Its quality doesn't matter at all. Just imagine if Fast and Furious 8 tried to recapture what the original Fast and Furious did, and that is exactly what Alien 3 did. Back in 2003, Fox released all the Alien movies on DVD in a special edition where the directors came back and presented a director's cut of each movie, except David Fincher. Yes, I know the director's cut of Aliens had been around before that, and actually that was the only version of Aliens I knew at that point. Fincher famously had such a tough time on the set that he, as I mentioned earlier, disowned the movie. There are plenty of great movies out there that are disowned by their creators. The one that always comes to my mind is American History X. And just like Alien 3, American History X will forever be one of those decent movies that we'll never see a truly finished version of. Fox released an assembly cut of the movie to accompany the recent DVD and Blu-ray versions in an attempt to restore a more cohesive version of the movie. I just watched the assembly cut in preparation for this article, and while I don't think it's anywhere near director's cut, I found it to be rather cumbersome. It fixes some continuity issues and adds a few moments that Fincher is known to have lobbied for, but in the end I think that theatrical cut is superior of the two. David Fincher is one of the most beloved directors working today, and yet this movie is hated even more than Alien Resurrection, which is penned by geek legend Joss Whedon. Even Fincher fans have shit on Alien 3 without blinking. Is Resurrection given a pass because it was written by Whedon? Or is Alien 3 hated because it was disowned by one of its creators? It's hard to compare the two because they are essentially two different types of movies. I've always maintained that Alien and Alien 3 are horror movies, while Aliens and Alien Resurrection are action movies. Personally, I don't blame Fincher from stepping away and never wanting to come back. I can attest that it is something difficult to do when it comes to art, whether you're the proverbial parent or step-parent or whatever. I, for one, am personally glad that this experience didn't turn him off from being a filmmaker altogether. It would have been a shame if we were never given such classics as Seven or Fight Club, especially if it was because that would-be director was disillusioned from filmmaking by the terrible experience of making their first feature, one that turned out to be not that bad in the end. So again, I just echoed pretty much everything I just talked about. And really, how hard would that be to work on something for probably in excess of a year and then just say, you know what, fuck it, I can't do this anymore, I'm walking out of here. From something that you wanted to do in the first place. Like, people have been blacklisted for less, I'm sure. Just throwing your middle finger up and saying, I'm out of here, guys, sorry. Luckily, it didn't deter him too much from movie making, because he followed that up with probably one of the greatest crime serial killer movies ever made in Seven. I want to say I watched Seven on VHS as well. It was after I was like, who's this Fincher guy? I didn't really have a DVD player at the time, I don't think. So I think I went down to that Blockbuster and rented it. And I remember watching with some friends, and when they are in the, I think it's the sloth room where they break in and the guy's been on the bed for a year. And when he finally wakes up, I remember just audibly gasping. And my friends are like, and they laughed at me because that happened. And I rewound it and I was like, did you guys miss that? Like, you have to see, like, I could have swore that guy was dead. That guy deserved an Oscar. He is an actor. And it has one of the most ballsy endings of all time. So much so that Fincher lobbied for it. Like, they wanted to change it. And he was like, I don't think so. And I believe it was an accident. Like, he was looking at the wrong version of the script. Which, I have a framed signed script of Seven on my wall. Signed by Pitt, Freeman, and Spacey. I wish it was signed by Fincher. That'd be so cool. The ending in that one is even different than the one in the movie. I think Brad Pitt's character just shoots John Doe in my script. He doesn't, like, there is no head in it. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie. So I think that head in the box came about because Fincher read the wrong version of the script, and then he was like, this is a way better ending. We need this. And I think that's one of the things I like about Fincher the most, is he's not afraid to fight for what he knows is right, in terms of the story or ending or even just particular scenes. He's known for shooting dozens and dozens and dozens of takes of the same scene because he's a perfectionist. And I think that shows in his movies for sure. And obviously Seven was a huge hit, and he moved on to The Game, which I remember watching in the back of a motorhome in Death Valley. We would go to Death Valley every year for Thanksgiving, and we'd drive around sometimes and look at the different sites. And my grandparents had a motorhome, so we would take the motorhome sometimes, and I was sitting in the back while we were going somewhere, and I think my aunt had bought it, just like, oh, I bought some movies, we can watch them, I guess. And one of them happened to be The Game. And besides that, I didn't see The Game until way later. I think I had to buy it on DVD from, some obscure website, and I paid, $20 for it, which even back then was a lot for a DVD. And this one kind of stands out to me, with the exception of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. There's really nothing purposefully nefarious going on. There's no truly, I guess, evil people in it. And I don't mean that evil because they're bad guys or anything like that. There's weird shit going on, but no one's doing it for evil's sake. I guess, I don't know, I'm having trouble explaining that, but in the end, everyone's cool. It's got a happy ending, and it keeps you guessing until the very end, really. Even really, when Sean Penn shows up on the roof and Michael Douglas shoots him and he falls off the roof, even until they pull him off of the airbag there, it keeps you guessing until right there. And what's interesting about this one is, at least to me, the way he shot it, how it's so dark. It's very Fincher-esque, but it's even for Fincher, it's very dark, and it makes you feel isolated yourself. Almost like San Francisco has been blocked off, and it's only populated by, almost like you're playing a video game, there's all these NPCs everywhere, and you can't really interact with them, and no one knows what you're talking about, even if you tried to. I don't know, that's the closest I can think of comparing it to something. It really captures what the character is feeling at the moment. And right after The Game, of course, he follows it up with my personal favorite movie out of anybody, and not just him, Fight Club. And again, I've talked about, watching that VHS and pausing it. And I've watched this movie so many times that I could probably put it on without the sound and know every character's lines. Again, it's one of those movies where it keeps you guessing almost until the end, obviously. And it's fun to go back afterwards and pick up on all the little shit where you realize that, hey, that was only him, or, when you're going back and you can see the little snippets of Tyler Durden pop up. And it's one of those fun movies. It's one of those movies where I wish I could forget watching it so I could watch it for the first time all over again and be surprised like that. And several movies have tried to copy, that same twist, I guess, where the main character is actually, imagining himself as several people. Like Secret Window tried to do it. But really, this is the first time I can think of where one of the main characters was actually imaginary. It kind of stands out that way. And it's also, along with Lord of the Rings, one of those rare movies where I feel that the movie is better than the book. I've read the book a couple times. It's not my, I can't get into it. And I have Fight Club 2, the comic book I need to read. It's been sitting on my shelf for almost a year now. Probably should get on that. So it would be fun to revisit that. I don't think it needs a sequel movie by any means, but anyway, so Panic Room Comes out in 2002. This is about the time where I'm discovering Fincher. Like, I'm looking into him. I want to know what he's doing next. And Panic Room comes out, and I'm not able to catch it in theaters. I'm not at this point yet where I'm comfortable going to the movies alone. I do it all the time now. I have no problem with it now. But back then, I couldn't do it. So I remember getting in my 69 Volkswagen Baja Bug when it came out on DVD in the rain, which it's raining right now, and I have Panic Room on the TV right now because it's one of my rainy day movies. I think we talked about it in the Die Hard episode. It always reminds me of a rainy day, which I love because it rains in the movie pretty much the entire time. And I went and bought it when it was raining, and I watched it when it was raining. So it just kind of, it reminds me of that. So every time it's raining, I like to put on Panic Room and watch it. But Panic Room is interesting to me because it's a very, generic story. You could have gave it to anybody and it would have been an okay movie. But you give it to someone like Fincher who knows how to build this world, knows how to move the camera inside this house, purposefully or not, decides to take the sound design in this whole other level. And that's one of the things I love about this movie is the amped up sounds. It's part of it because in the very beginning they're trying to sneak in, so every sound is amplified. And it's not, there are really no generic sounds in it. One of the things that bugs me in movies is when like you hear a door shut and it's that same creak, or a telephone will ring, and I appreciate it, but I'm not a fan of the Wilhelm scream or anything like that. I like movies to be on their own and have their own sound design and things like that. So that's one of the things I love about this one is that I love to turn it up loud and watch. I can't watch it quiet. You have to turn it up. And this stars Kristen Stewart before she was all Twilight famous. There was I don't know if it was Jay Leno or Conan O'Brien. When this movie came out, I remember watching. They had Howie Mandel work as worked at the ticket window at a movie theater, and when people would buy tickets to Panic Room, he would fake spoil it for them. So he would be like, and they would say, "Can I get 2 tickets to Panic Room?" And he'd be like, "Oh, it's crazy. Have you heard about this movie yet? Can you believe that Dwight Yoakam was Jodie Foster's friend the entire time?" And then people would get super pissed off, and it was before I had seen it, but I was like, that's kind of a jerk move. But then you realize that he's just messing with them. Of course, Dwight Yoakam is a nice little surprise there at the end as Raoul, but he's obviously not her friend by any means. And it was kind of a long time between Panic Room and Zodiac, really. And I guess Fincher kind of does this. He'll do movies rapid fire. You got Seven, The Game, Fight Club, all within a 4-year time period. But then you have Panic Room, and then 5 years later is Zodiac, and then a year later is Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and then it's rapid fire sometimes. And then obviously Gone Girl was in 2014, and it's 3 years later, and not really working on anything. Hopefully he doesn't do World War Z. I think he should. He's one step away, I think, from pulling a Francis Ford Coppola and Jack. I know people like that movie, but it doesn't really seem like a Francis Ford Coppola movie, you know what I mean? But anyway, to Zodiac, which I think is his masterpiece. I really do. Fight Club was my favorite movie of his, but Zodiac is his best movie, I think. There are 2 times in his career where when I was trying to do this stuff, I was like, there's 2 stories that I would love to tell. One of them is Zodiac. So having your favorite director then do that and pull it off is so cool. And I love how because obviously they've never solved this case. There's been some obvious copycats. What I love about it is with each generation of the killings, it's a different person. So you're never led one way or the other towards making an assumption of who it was. Obviously, they kind of make a soft, like, he was probably the killer, this person here. And he does it the same kind of technique in Social Network we'll talk about in a minute. And I always love in movies when they go to places where I live or I have lived or whatever. I always have to make a little side note to whoever's with me. So I love when they go to, or when, I guess most of them do, when Paul Avery goes down to Riverside Community College, my alma mater in Riverside County, California. So I always have to, like, hey, like, I know that place. I've been there. I took film classes there. I dropped out of there. And then Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a year later, it's probably a little over a year. I think Zodiac came out in March, whereas Benjamin Button came out in December. So it was a little over a year. Most people agree with me. It's not a bad movie, but it's definitely, maybe some people would disagree with this. They might switch some rankings around, but I think it's his weakest movie for sure. The ambition is there. I like Brad Pitt in it, and it's a cool movie. It's alright. I don't know. I don't even own it, which is weird. I probably should. It's got some cool effects in there. I don't know. There's not really much I can say about this one. Again, I think it's his weakest entry. But what surprised me was how little love really The Social Network got. I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? David Fincher's doing a goddamn Facebook movie. And I'm sure I could find the post somewhere where I was like, oh my god, Jesus. But I think it's his first movie that was nominated for Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken. I'm surprised, like, I did a poll on Twitter and asked, I had to do two different ones, like, which is your favorite Fincher movie? And I was honestly expecting Zodiac and The Social Network to kind of fight it out, but they really didn't. That kind of surprised me a lot. I thought that Social Network was held in a more higher regard. I love this movie. And like I said, during Zodiac, like, he kind of played it ambiguous. He does it in this too, like, to a more subtle degree. You never really see Zuckerberg, I guess, interact with the Winklevoss twins to the point where you're taking sides. I think the script does a good job of portraying both sides of the story without you making the wrong assumption, I guess, or taking sides with someone because you feel you have to. It's like a good documentary, I guess. And those are the best documentaries where they accurately portray both sides of the subject unbiasedly. And this one, he is a jerk in this, no doubt whatsoever. Did he do all that other stuff? It kind of leaves it up in the air, really, for the stuff that's not concrete, you know what I mean? Obviously, the courts decided one way, and I really don't know the true story. There's only a few people that actually do, so whatever. But it is a good movie. It's the movie where Fincher he has this specific look now of all his movies, which is fine. It kind of sets him apart and almost gives him like his own little mini Fincher universe, because you can always tell when you're watching one. It has that. It's almost like a dream state. Everything's either like super glossy or a little fogged over, if you will. It's hard for me to describe, but I think if you're a Fincher fan or a film buff, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say, like, each of his movies now looks like a Fincher movie. I wish he would try some different things for sure, but if he likes it, and obviously he's my favorite, then cool, we can roll with that. Zodiac kind of started it, like, you can tell he's tinkering with stuff, and Social Network's like, yep, this is my style, this is what I want to do. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo continued that, and that is the second instance where I was like, that I would love to make that movie. And when it was announced that Fincher was doing it, I was like, that is like a perfect choice. You know what I mean? It's like, who are we going to give this World War II movie to? Steven Spielberg. Who are we going to give this brutal murder story to? Fucking David Fincher, man. He's like the perfect fit. And going back to, his own style and look of movies, even if you don't watch his movies, if you've seen House of Cards, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Everything has that same look to it. But Dragon Tattoo, I loved that book, and I thought it was a faithful adaptation. It updates things that needed to be updated and reworks things that don't necessarily work for film. And I am I'm kind of torn on not getting sequels to it because I didn't like the second and third books in that series. The second one was okay until I realized what it was going towards, and I thought they were going to be 3 like separate adventures. I thought that would have been cool if they did it that way, but having 2 and 3 go together is kind of weird. And then so the first one always stands on its own to me, and then the 2 and 3 are like its own series, I guess, or you could combine them and make one huge book, and that would be okay. So in that regards, like, it's cool that Fincher got to do Dragon Tattoo, and it kind of, there's a few, if you pick up on it, there's a few things sprinkled in there setting up stuff for future stories. So I knew that if they would go forward with a sequel, that Fincher wouldn't be on board, so that would just be weird anyway. So in that regards, I'm happy that there's not going to be a sequel. And the fact that I like that movie bums me out that we don't get to see those characters again. There's been talk about adapting the new book that that guy didn't write into a movie with the same people. I don't know. I really don't know how I feel about that one, but if it was its own story, skipping that middle part, then I think I would be okay with that. One of the coolest parts of that movie is when it came out on Blu-ray. You know, it's the combo pack, and the DVD of it looks like a burned copy of it. I think that is so friggin' clever and fits with the motif of that movie so much. And then finally, in 2014, he did Gone Girl with Ben Affleck. This one was a weird one to me, and based on those Twitter polls that I did, his 2 top movies are Zodiac and Gone Girl. And Gone Girl really surprised me. Zodiac did not. I expected more love for Social Network, like I said. But Gone Girl is really the one that surprised me. When we saw it in the theater, like, I didn't like it. I thought it was okay. I thought it was kind of textbook Fincher. He's in his comfort zone, obviously. It's not a bad movie, but it was almost like, all right, well, what else do you have? You know, I've seen all your tricks. Like, do something new. Obviously, I own it now, and it's better. I like it more. I'll watch it occasionally. My girlfriend really likes it, which is a rarity. And what I like about Fincher, and Christopher Nolan does the same thing. He'll take actors who you're like, oh my God, what is he doing? And like gets these great performances out of them. Like Tyler Perry. I'm not a big fan of Tyler Perry, but seeing him in this movie like gave me so much more respect for him, because I was like, holy shit, this guy can do stuff. You know what I mean? He was in Star Trek a little bit, but you don't really get to judge him too much off of that. But in this one, like, he's almost like the most interesting part of the movie whenever he's on screen. The only part that takes me out of it, I guess, is Neil Patrick Harris. He seems a little miscast in it. And this is the first movie in a while that, at least the first Fincher movie in a while, that doesn't have any of his regulars. He's got some people in here from previous movies, but there's none of the Fincher regulars, which is interesting to me. So, I don't know. So that's my talk on Fincher. Like I said, he's my favorite. When I did those Twitter polls, there was big surprises in there, and it was interesting to see where you guys are coming from. It was great to see the response on it. The first one, I got an even 100 votes on it, which was cool. It was easy to tally up who got what and see that. So I appreciate you guys sharing that and interacting with that. So I hope this episode played into that and garnered your excitement a little more. So tell me, what is your favorite Fincher movie and why? What's your least favorite and why? I'm always curious at that. He's like Nolan. Even his weakest movie is still a pretty good movie. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. So until next time, that's a wrap.
Mr. Brown, that's a little too close to Mr. Shit. Are you the police?
No, man. We're musicians. I work for Kaiser Soze. I work for Kaiser Soze.
Where's the fucking money, shithead?